Welcome to the Profile Corner. In a previous video, we built the French cleat wall that's back here, and I mentioned that I had some routers I need to have stored somewhere, and I figured that I would be able to store some of them, at least, on this French cleat that's right back here, and the routers would extend up potentially into this area here, and that's why I left this area here blank with no French cleat running through that area. On this board here, which was milled up in the last project video, I have 9 routers sitting on top of it, spaced out roughly 8 inches apart, and this board measures currently 9¼ inches wide by 77 inches long, and surprisingly that's exactly the length that I need to run from this location here all the way down to the end of the French cleat. And so that's going to work out perfectly. And then what I'll probably do in a later video is use these 2 French cleats down here for storing some hand planes. I mentioned previously that I've got a hand plane collection from 20 years ago, and as a matter of fact I sharpened some of the block planes in that hand plane collection in a previous video, and so this would probably be a good place to locate them rather than having them down on a shelf, such as down at the bottom of the shelf that's just over to the side. It might be nice to have them up on a French cleat where they're away from the concrete floor where they can pick up a lot of moisture. Okay, so I've got roughly 12, maybe 15 routers that I need to find a home for on the French cleat wall or somewhere else. And so we should probably get started here. I need to build an assembly, actually 3 of them, that'll go underneath this board that'll be used to mount this board up onto the French cleat wall, just as I did in a previous video when I built an assembly for holding routers onto another French cleat wall. I'll show you a picture of that right now. And then once we build those assemblies using box joints in the corner, just like we did before, then we can mount this board on top of those assemblies and hang it up on the wall. We should be able to do that in today's video. I just went through and figured out what materials I'm going to need to build this project for the French cleat wall. I'm going to need 3 boards that are 7½ inches wide by 12 inches tall, and that'll be for the boards that sit back in back here for hanging up the wrenches and the collets and things like that. And that board is what mounts to the French cleat wall. And then I'll need 6 boards that are 3¼ inches by 8 inches, and those are the arms. Those are the boards that are right here that come out. And then there's going to be 3 boards that are 3¼ inches by 7½ inches, and that's the back area back in here that gets box jointed into the arms. So what I've done is I've gone through all the spare boards that were left over from previous projects that were shown on this channel, and I found some boards that could be used to build the assemblies that go underneath the shelf. So for instance, out of this board here, I can get 4 arms roughly located where you can see there, even though it's got a split here that meant that it couldn't be used for the project that it was originally intended for. I can use it for this project, but I'll just have to cut around that split. Out of this board, I'll be able to get one of the back boards in this area here. I'll have to take care of some minor defects in the boards. There's a couple knot holes there that we'll have to fill, and the back side's a little bit worse. This has a open knot hole, so I'll probably use the front side here instead. And this is kind of an interesting board, the way the sapwood interweaves in with the heartwood here. And so I should be able to get another backboard out of this one, and then 2 arms. And this board I should be able to get the 3 arm backs out of. This board here, I should be able to get another back out of this area and not use this area. And then I've got a couple other boards here on the table that I don't need to use for this project. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the table saw and start doing some rough cutting on these boards to cut them to length. I've got to switch out the saw blade. Right now I still have the 24 tooth rip blade on the saw. I need to put in the 40 tooth combination blade. So I'll take care of that now, and then we'll get started with the cutting. Now I've got 9 boards that'll need to be cut to 3 1/4 inches wide, and 3 boards that'll need to be cut to 7 1/2 inches wide. I want to cut them all the final width at the last, but what I need to do first is to get rid of this crack that's right through here. So what I'll do is I'll set up a cut to come right down through here, and that should allow me to have a straight edge right down through here that I can then use later on to get 3 1/4 inches. And then I'll come back and I'll cut this side of the crack, and that should then allow me to get the 3 1/4 inches out of this section here. And then the next thing that I need to do is to break apart this board. Now I've got to be careful not to waste too much space, because this board here has to go all the way up into this area here, but I've got a defect on the other side. I've got some wane that's there, so I don't want to waste a whole lot of space this direction, so I've got to be real careful about that. Okay, so I need to get this set up for the first cut, and it looks like I need to go to 5 3/4 for the first cut. Aside. Now I can take this down. To about 5 inches. On this board. Square end on it. This first board needs to be 12 inches long, so I'll overcut it a little bit, and then we can cut it the final length once we get it ripped down. I can rip down to a little over 7 1/2 inches wide. That way I can clean up this edge back here. boards, which will be similar to this one. Now that I've got these cut, I'll flip them over, and now I'll cut them to 7.5 inches wide. Okay, now on these boards, I need to get rid of the cut edge first. Got several of them here. All these boards need to be cut down to 3¼ inches wide. To get it started here, what I'm going to do is I'll set up the wrench to 3 3/8. I'll make the first cut on all these boards, and then I'll switch over to 3¼ inches, and then I'll recut the first boards that are cut in each one. That way, if there's a jointed edge here on the edge, I can get rid of that, leaving a nice smooth edge. Okay, this stack of boards need to be cut to 8 inches long. So I'll first square up the end, and then I'll flip it over, and then cut it to 8 inches long. So here's where I've got the wing that I need to work around. And so that's why I selected to start by squaring up this end. Needs to be cut at 7.5 inches long. need to be cut to 12 inches long. Okay, so next up, I need to start laying out for the box joints that'll be cut into some of these boards, namely these boards that I've got here that are 3 1/4 inches across. Okay, the dado saw was already set up for cutting box joints from the last project that was cut over here. I have the arms here in matched pairs, and so what I've done is I've tried to put the best quality face on the outside of each pair. So for instance, for this one, the outside boards look nicer than the inside boards. And the same goes for this one here. Now on these arms, I'm only going to cut the box joints into the end that's labeled with an F. The F side will be going toward this key that's down here. So that's the same kind of symbology that I used on the last project, where that F represented the front of the cabinet. And for these boards, which will be in the back, these need to have the box joints cut on both ends, and so I have F marked on both ends. Okay, we'll be starting out with these boards. So what I'll do is I'll get these other boards out of the way. Okay, now we can get started on these boards, and I've got to make sure that I've got the side marked F closest to this key. Okay, now what I need to do is make sure that all the box joints are cut to the correct depth. So I'll verify that off camera, and that could happen where it wasn't cut to the correct length. If I had this board slightly tipped when it was set down, or if it didn't seat down all the way on the key, that could be a problem. So I'll go through and I'll verify that all these are at the correct depth. And if one or two of them are not, I'll recut those off camera, and then we'll come back at the workbench and put these joints together. Yeah, I've got the boards arranged in their matched pairs again. So now I'm ready to do a dry assembly to see if the finger joints go together. Okay, they all went together. Let's see if we can get rid of this little bit of a gap here. Okay, that's flush now. Other side's flush. Okay, this is not fitting together properly, so I may have to recut these joints. This one went together perfectly. This one is got a little bit of a gap here, so I may have to recut some of these just to the right depth. It looked like these were at the correct depth, but apparently there's a couple that are not. Okay, that one looks good. Looks good all around. Okay. And that joint looks good. This one here I need to do a little bit of fixing by recutting some of these joints a little bit deeper. This joint looks good all the way around, but this one I need to recut some of the fingers, so I'll go take care of that off camera. I'll get the first one glued up on camera, and then I'll take care of the other two off camera. Okay, this one looks good. I'll let the glue set up for about 2 hours. Then I'll take my scraper and come in and scrape off the glue before it fully hardens. And then of course I'll wipe off the bench so that I don't have a glue mess on the bench. I'll get the other two glued up now. I've got to cut a 3/4 inch wide dado across the face of these boards. I have a 3/8 inch wide dado stack mounted in here right now. And so what I've done is I've set up the rip fence here so that I have a magnetic switch stop block set up, and then I've got a 3/8 inch wide setup block that I've set between the stop block and the rip fence. So what I can do is I can make a single pass through on all the boards, and then I can remove the setup block, move the rip fence over, and then make another pass through, and then I should end up with a dado that's 3/4 of an inch wide. Let's go ahead and get started. What I've also done here is I've set the rip fence initially to be the width of this, which is 3 1/4 inches from the edge of the dado blade. I'm set up to drill a 2-inch diameter hole using a Forstner bit. This will be a hole for each router so that a router bit may stay in the router when it's mounted up onto the wall. I have a fence mounted back here so that I make sure that I have all these holes drilled exactly the same distance from the front edge of the shelf. Hold the space about 8 inches from center point. I want to take this 1/4 inch radius roundover bit and run along the edges, staying about 1 inch away from the back edge, and then also around the insides of these circles. Now we can go on to assembling these pieces here to the backs, and then once those are attached, then we can attach the shelf board. We will have a cross grain gluing situation here because the grain is going in different directions, so I only want to put glue in the center. I've got this spacer board inserted into the dado that was cut earlier so that when the backer board is put onto the top of the other board here, we know that the shelf will fit into that area, just in case there's an ever so slight difference. So I'll put some glue down in this area here. Back and forth a little bit to smear it. And now what I can do is I can pre-drill for some screw holes. So now that I've got the first hole pre-drilled, I'll put in the first screw so that I don't have a risk that this board's going to shift on me when I go to drill the other holes. It will set up the other assemblies the same way. And now I'm getting ready to do the final glue up. Here I've got the grain running in the same direction as this shelf board, so I can actually glue this entire surface. And back here I got to be careful not to get too much glue back there, because that is actually going in the opposite direction, as you can see here. So I'll put some glue here as well as at the front here, and then also here to hopefully hold that shelf in place, and then I'll clamp these boards onto the shelf. Okay, so now I need to get something heavy to put onto here to hold this down to the boards that are down below. Okay, the router should work out nicely to weight down the shelf board till the glue dries. So after the glue dries, we'll put on the French cleat onto the back surface here, and then we should be able to apply a finish to it, hang it up on the wall, and get the routers up on the wall. I'm in the process of attaching the French cleats onto the back. This will be attached with 5 screws. I've got longer screws that'll be going in at an angle. These are about 1 5/8 inches long, and these other screws are probably about 1 1/4 inches long. I've pre-drilled everything here using squeeze clamps to hold the spacer that's 3/4 inch in place, so that I'm able to get this lined up correctly so that all 3 of them are in the same plane. Unfortunately, these black screws have a head that doesn't appear to be an exact match for a number 2 Phillips. Okay, now I'll get the last 2 mounted up onto the backs, and then I'll bring the camera back. Hey, this turned out pretty nice. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.